Hello, agentpreneurs of ListReports, and welcome to episode 36 of the Daily List Report. This is day one of Stand and Salute Extreme Ownership, an entire week dedicated to the military, to the lessons we can learn from them, to fundraising, capping off the week with Jocko Willink himself coming on Friday, the author of Extreme Ownership. Here's how we're going to start the week. This is going to be crazy. This is going to be a lot of fun. Tons of great content. What I'm going to do right now is I have a co-host this week. So, Wessal, why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone. Wessal Khader here, Randy's partner in crime for this week. We have a lot of fun coming to you this week. I'm excited to be co-hosting from, of course, another remote location. But we're praying for good internet this week, guys.
Yes, we are. Today we've got Orange County, we've got San Diego, we've got Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. We've got it all today. Yep. This is going to be great. So in just a few minutes, we're going to bring on my brother-in-law, Lieutenant Colonel John Boyer, who is deployed right now at Air Force Central Command at Shaw Air Force Base. And he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Great way to kick off the week. And then he's going to give us some words of hope and inspiration as we begin this great week. And then Wessal, who's coming on right after John?
I am so excited to have David Dearie coming on to speak to us about some incredible stories of extreme ownership and his time and leadership in the Navy and some of the nonprofit work that we support here at ListReports. So we have a really great lineup today. This is a great way to frame the week for everybody out there listening, for all the real estate agents and agentpreneurs out there that are planning on sharing this content with your friends, your family, your spheres of influence online this week. We have an incredible lineup for you. So please get your coffee, get seated here, get ready to actually enjoy the content here and think about creative ways you can share this with everyone you know, because we have some amazing influencers, leaders, and just a wonderful words of wisdom to share for you this week. And we're hoping that you get full attention here because these guests are very, very much going to change lives this week.
Absolutely. So Wessal, we've got a couple of announcements here. So the first one, I'm going to sort of bring it up on the screen right now, is we've got a fun little contest. So again, as you all know, we have Jocko Willink coming on. He's the New York Times best-selling author of Extreme Ownership, former Navy SEAL, and we've actually got some signed copies of his book to give away. And so what I have on screen right now is our Facebook page for the Daily List Report. If you go to this page and you look down here on the bottom left, you see a little button that says Enter to Win. If you click on Enter to Win, you're going to get this little form that pops up, and you're going to fill that out, and all you have to do is visit our YouTube page. That's it. If you like it, you can subscribe, but you have to visit our YouTube page. And you can do this every day this week. So you can have one entry per day. So if you want to maximize your entries and chances of winning this book, you go to this form every single day and you visit our YouTube page. And if you love it, you subscribe, but you're already entered to win. And next week, we're going to announce those winners. If you are users of our product, all you have to do is log in. You're going to see a thing pop up that you can click on, and you can enter that way as well. So we've got all sorts of great ways for you to enter this contest. Again, we're giving away 5 signed copies, and they're signed actually by both Jocko Willink and Andrew Paul, who we're going to talk about a little bit later this week. So, Wessal, what else have we got going? We've got some fundraising happening.
Oh my gosh, we have so many amazing things happening every single day this week. On Wednesday, we actually have the founder of Support the Enlisted Project, a 501c3 here in Southern California that is part of a larger group of 7 nonprofit organizations that are currently supporting the military, especially during this crisis, on a 24-hour virtual fundraising campaign we are supporting called Stand and Salute. So for 24 hours on the day of this Wednesday, there's going to be a great window where us as a company, as well as everyone listening out there, has an opportunity to jump in and support the military nonprofits we're bringing to the show to actually give some exposure on ways that us as civilians can support our military right now through these times. So we have a really great opportunity where the company and everyone else on the show here can contribute and support our junior enlisted military who are greatly in need of our help right now. So we have some great leaders going to come talk about that on this Wednesday as well.
That's right. And Wessal, we've got matching funds, right? So talk about the matching funds for the donations.
We do. We actually, during this 24-hour Stand and Salute virtual campaign, we have donors on standby ready to match funds that come through this campaign. So ListReports is ready to make a donation because we know that it'll go double or even triple the length, and that is for our military families. So we have quite a few backers that are ready to take your donations and amplify them. So we'll have more on that in a link that we'll provide so you guys can understand how to get ready to potentially get your spheres to contribute as well.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay. So exciting week, amazing. Get ready for Wednesday for the fundraiser. A great lineup of content. What I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to introduce Lieutenant Colonel John Boyer. So he's my brother-in-law, so I'm fond of this guy. He's a military chaplain. As I said before, he's currently at Air Force Central Command, deployed at Shaw Air Force Base, and he's joining us remotely. And so, John, I'm actually going to bring you on the screen right now. So, John, why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Randy. It's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me
Welcome, John.
Absolutely, absolutely. So obviously, John and I go back a long ways, right? And so, John, thank you so much for doing this. So I think here's how we're going to kick this off. So, John, why don't you go ahead and lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance? You've got a flag behind you. I've got a flag that I'm pulling up to the left of you, and let's start with that to kick off this week.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. You guys are taking a moment to remember the honor and service of our ones who have worn our nation's uniform. I think it's awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to do that as we celebrate Memorial Day and this great opportunity to remember the shared love that we have for our country.
Absolutely.
So for those of us who are there, go ahead and join me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. If you are a civilian, just put your hand over your heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're military, you're welcome to stand and render the salute, which is what I will be doing. So let's go ahead and say the Pledge of Allegiance together. Join me. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America. And to the
republic for
which it stands.
One nation.
Under God.
Indivisible.
Liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Thanks for doing that. John, that was fantastic.
Thank you, John.
We didn't coordinate this very well, but I didn't want to say it over you because people couldn't hear you.
I know.
But thank you so
much
for doing that.
We need one of those bouncy balls, Randy, that lets us all guide at the same time. But then, John, I think I heard a flyover at the same time that you were doing the pledge. Was that correct?
There's all F-16s flying over right now. It's pretty awesome.
There's some Americana for our Monday morning here. Fantastic.
Hey,
John, go ahead, John.
Many of us, if not all of us, have gone through an extremely difficult time lately as our country and our world is navigating this COVID-19 pandemic. And as a military chaplain, I'd just like to offer a real brief word of hope to the viewers today. It's helped me tremendously over the years. One of my favorite heroes, Charles Swindoll, is a former president of Dallas Theological Seminary. He's a well-known Christian author and pastor, author of dozens of best-selling books. And he writes this great quote. He says, "The longer I live, the more I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me," and watch this, 90% how I react to it. Yeah. And so the focus for us is that when we face times of challenge or difficulty or trials, is that we have to focus our strength and our mentality and our effort on the one thing that we can control no matter what we face, and that's our attitude. And so this week, as you're talking about extreme ownership in leadership, I think one of the greatest ways to demonstrate extreme ownership is by taking ownership of our attitude. Focusing not on the 10% of the circumstances or the challenges that we face, but rather the 90% of how we react to them and what we do next. Because what we do next, how we move forward in hard times, says a lot about our character and our purpose. So those are just some words of encouragement I thought I'd offer today. Hopefully it encourages and blesses somebody's soul today.
John, that was beautiful. And of course, thank you for your service and for taking time today. I can't think of a better way to kick off this week than to have you on, have the pledge, and have those words that you just shared. So, John, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, John, we'll talk to you again soon. Why don't you say goodbye to our agentpreneurs out there?
Take care.
Thanks, John.
Well, Wessal, what do you think? Great way to kick off the week?
I mean, I'm already off to an emotional start here. This is so much our passion generally, just real human beings, real interactions, real lifetime thoughts on how to deal with the circumstances we're all going through, whether you're in the military, you're not, you're an agent, you're a loan officer, you're any civilian, you're a restaurant owner. I'm looking down here on the Old Town Circle where our office is right now, Randy, looking at all the small businesses and business owners affected by what's going on. And words like his are exactly what we need to remember every single minute of the day so that we're not wasting the minutes God's given us, right? So I have a lot of responsibility responsibility over every one of these minutes, which is why we appreciate everyone out there listening to us right now and every day this week. We feel like it's a responsibility to share this kind of amazing information we have access to, which is why I'm very excited to bring on our next guest and have some of his inspirational leadership and words of wisdom that I've personally drawn from for years now on a personal level that I cannot wait to share with our audience today, Randy. Do you think it's time? Are we ready to bring him?
Let's do it. So, Wessal, why don't you go ahead and introduce our next guest for today?
I would be honored to. David Dearie, who's near and dear to my heart, Command Master Chief, U.S. Navy, retired, is an incredible human being, dad, business leader, nonprofit founder and executive, and he's just a good all-around human being. I would love to share the story of his life with you guys. Of course, we only have a few minutes today, which is never going to do it justice. But David is actually a Carlsbad, California native. He was in the military for more than 30 years of active service in the Navy, was promoted all the way from radio seaman to Command Master Chief, and ultimately held the position of Region Command Master Chief for all of San Diego at his final tour of duty, which is during the time frame I think I met David, and we got to do some really amazing nonprofit work together because of his efforts. And this gentleman has been in charge of thousands of sailors, active duty, enlisted leaders in the military for years. And those thousands of active duty sailors were responsible for the safety of our country. I can think of no greater leadership responsibility than one similar to that. And the things that David was able to accomplish with that authority and responsibility that were so selfless for himself, his family, for the nation are so incredible. We thought we'd want to bring him on today and share some of the stories, a few of which are very in alignment with the notion of extreme ownership. And so when we brought David the story and said, hey, would you mind kicking us off this week? Of course, he had quite a few relevant experiences to draw from to share with us today. So we are very, very happy to welcome David Dearie on. David, are you with us?
I got David on the screen right now. Hey, David.
Hey, how are you guys this morning? Good morning.
Hi. How's it going, David?
Oh, just doing fine. Enjoying the kickoff, the Pledge of Allegiance, the flyovers. Oh, the sound of freedom. Something that we never get tired of.
Sound of freedom. That's right.
Wessal, I know that this idea of enlisted officers, this has been on your mind. So why don't we start there? Why don't we kick it off with some questions for David there, and then we're going to get into extreme ownership.
I would love to. When we think about military, generally speaking, for civilians anyway, we think officers and admirals and generals and these leaders, but we don't really thoroughly see the majority of the human beings involved in the military that get stuff done. And I would like to refer to that as the enlisted group of leaders in the military. That's actually very much the group that I spend a lot of my own personal time and effort supporting, which is where I met David. David is the leader of those leaders and has been for years. So I'm really interested in your perspective, David. Would you please share with our civilian audience just a quick educational piece on the difference between an enlisted person and an officer in the military?
Yeah. So just by sheer numbers to start off with, we have far, like you alluded, we have far fewer officers than we do enlisted. When the military all first started, the officers were the educated people. So even now, to enlist in the military as an officer, you're going to have a 4-year degree, and but over the years, with a press of education, to be honest, over 70% of our enlisted forces have a degree now. In a nutshell, the officers, they come up with the plans, and the enlisted execute those plans. I mean, that's a real simple down form. If I were to give you some numbers, for example, across all branches of the military, there's over 1.3 million serving. Of those 1.3 million, when I looked it up earlier, there was 1.1 enlisted and 200,000 officers.
Wow.
So yeah, so just by sheer numbers, far fewer officers than there are enlisted.
That's fantastic. That means the bulk of those people are being led by the bulk of the leaders in the military. And, I've read many places on the internet about you being one of the Navy's experts on military and family programs, and specifically leadership education, which brings me to, I want to tee you up to sort of explain how you've taken your transition out of service through your retirement and what you've done with that, because we believe that's probably the coolest example of extreme ownership that's relevant to our user base right now. Would you mind sharing with us how you've taken that expertise and what you've done with it?
And David, if you
Sure.
don't mind kind of kicking that off, like, can you just sort of define for our audience, like, what extreme ownership means to you? Like, when you think about that term, what is extreme ownership?
Well, extreme ownership to me is going all in. Being passionate about something, having a vision, and then not standing on the sidelines and thinking about it, not sharing it with a bunch of people and hoping that maybe, but to extreme ownership. Just look at the word extreme. I can own something, but extreme ownership is I'm giving my heart and soul, everything. I'm going after it, and you, I can identify. I think we can all identify somebody who is going after it just by their authenticity and their passion. When it becomes something that you think about day and night, when it's all you can talk about, when your 27-word, 15-second elevator speech rolls off the tip of your tongue without any kind of true rehearsal, you're set for extreme ownership. So to me, that's what it is. And Wessal, to your question about the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, just as a brief background, in 2008, we, the Navy, closed down all of our formal and leadership development. It was a requirement to promote to the next pay grade. But when we went into war, we had to issue all kinds of waivers. People couldn't get to the schoolhouse. And so we had over 50,000 people promoting on waivers in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
It just became something that unmanageable. So myself included in the leadership decision-making process, we felt it made sense at the time to close all the schoolhouses and let us on the local level teach leadership. So a 2-week class was condensed into a 3-day PowerPoint presentation to be delivered on site. And it didn't take long, several years. And I, as well as others, saw a decrease in our leadership from our
Hmm.
enlisted force. Not that going through a 2-week school is going to make you a better leader, but it gives you a frame of reference. In my opinion, without any kind of leadership training, we gravitate whatever leadership we were led with. So if you were led by bad leaders, you will probably emulate bad leaders because that's what we do. If you're a parent, you start hearing your kids say some weird stuff. Where'd you hear that? And then all of a sudden you hear yourself say it. So my response, I kind of grew up thinking, I can't change the whole Navy. I can only change my little portion. So when I was a work center supervisor with 2 other people, then I can help affect change for those 2. As the region master chief, I was in a position that gave me a great sphere of influence. And so I created a leadership class. And in 2013 was when I had the idea. In February 2014, May of 2013, so 4 months later, we executed the class. 1 year after that, because of how great it was and the impact it had, we started the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. So over the last 6 years, we have now 5 separate programs. Over 18,000 enlisted military have gone through and graduated through our programs. We're worldwide from the perspective that we have enlisted military from all branches travel from all over the world to attend our programs that we host here in Southern California and San Diego specifically.
That's tremendous. That's a massive population to have influence with leadership training. I think is so interesting because as we're trying to share with a lot of our real estate agent viewers this week, the military's perspective on preparedness and readiness and mentality that has made us so much better suited to deal with certain crises because of your experience in the military. You think about the nature of ELF leveraging the civilians' preparedness and readiness to teach back into the military. Can you comment on that for a second?
Yeah, so love to. Thank you. That's a great question. Would you be a guest speaker? And I would say, well, have you ever heard me speak before? Well, no, but you're a region command master chief. Okay, well, just because I have a position doesn't make me a good speaker. And just because I'm in a leadership position, I've got some great evals written on myself doesn't necessarily mean I'm a great leader. You got to look at the people who you've led and how they're doing, I think, to see how good. Look at civilians. And if you're the CEO of a company or you're in the C ring, chances are you're a pretty good leader. especially if it's a Fortune 200 company, a very productive organization. And a lot of those companies share very similar leadership styles that the military has. We may name it something differently, but it's there. And I learned so much from civilian leaders that I want to put the civilian leaders in front of the military leaders, because then when the military leaders hear the terminology of the civilian leaders, when they hear the examples of what made them successful and what made their company successful, when they hear the humility that is shared among many civilian leaders, that same humility that a lot of our enlisted leaders, the ones that are really successful, that they have to exhibit, then that resonates. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes we can look at grass being greener on the other side. No. And so a lot of military will say, man, I can't wait till I get out so I can fill in the blank. Well, when they hear that, there's a lot of similarities on the outside as there is on the inside. So maybe it's not always greener. Maybe I need to water my grass a little better. Maybe I need to take a better attitude. But it actually reinforces some of what is already being done, not necessarily taught, because again, we don't have that same structured schoolhouses that we once had. But that's not to say leadership still isn't being taught and developed, because there are a lot of enlisted that are going out looking for other organizations like the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, spending some of their own money to go through leadership development schools, college, getting organizational leadership master's degrees, going through seminars, things like that. So having the civilian, giving them an opportunity to give back to the military, and seeing how the two, the ideas of leadership do marry up and align very well.
Yeah. Now it's interesting, David. What I wanted you to talk about now is, what can you share with the civilians out there about the preparedness that you learned in the military? Right. We talked about a few things, in lead up to this call: selflessness, perspective, mentality. So why don't you jump in and talk about some things that you've learned that our audience can take action on right now today?
Sure. So I get asked, I've been asked by Wessal, I've been asked by friends, how are you dealing with the crisis, staying at home? And my response is simply, it's like I'm on a deployment. Except I only have about 5 other people in my house that I get to walk around and talk to instead of a ship of thousands. And as I've thought about this, there's emergencies and there's a crisis, and oftentimes those words are used interchangeably, but they're really not. And I look at an emergency as something that we practice or rehearse for all the time. When you get behind the wheel of a car, defensive driving, it's an emergency if somebody's running a red light and you try to avoid it. Things that we tend to have control over. And in the military, we train for emergencies all the time. We even have what we call an emergency breakaway. When 2 ships are doing an underway replenishment, at the end, you do an emergency breakaway and one peels off. When we practice firefighting and general quarters drills, you name it, we practice for emergencies all the time. We can control those. A crisis is something bigger than an emergency. A crisis is something that happens, or it affects us at a global level, an economic level, a societal level. And it's more frustrating because there's very little we can do to control a crisis. In fact, John Maxwell has a great quote that he shared. He says he defines a crisis as an intense time of difficulty requiring a decision that will be a turning point. And he goes on to say as well that in a leader's life, we don't have 2 good days, right? Every day of a leader, you may have a good day and a bad day, but it's rare that you have 2 good days put together. A crisis is nothing more than 2 or more bad days together. And in the military, we're prepared. So I look at, and we look at, what have we successfully done through emergencies? Look back at things that we've overcome. Look at fires that we've put out underway. Look at threats that we've encountered and how we've been able to fight through that. And look at the crisis, find that crisis, and how can you, I don't want to say dumb it down, but that's the term I'll use. How can you dumb it down and put it in your own perspective so it's a manageable thing? So in your life, that crisis becomes an emergency. I can't control whether there's going to be a vaccine 18 months from now or 8 days from now. No, I can't control that. But I can control myself and my interaction when I go outside. I can control what the Enlisted Leadership Foundation does in our business, We do all face-to-face facilitation. We can put everything on hold and we can control that. But we can also look at this crisis as an opportunity, because when a crisis erupts, leaders show up. Leaders don't disappear in a crisis, they arrive. And a crisis actually defines leaders. Even in a time of emergency, you look in your own emergencies in your businesses, who shows up? Who all of a sudden comes up with grandiose ideas or executes things like, wow, I never knew they had it in them. And a crisis does the same thing. So in ELF, we started taking our programs and putting them virtually and providing virtual education opportunities for any enlisted that are interested. Our graduates, our future students, and anybody else. We don't charge for it, free of charge, because we're learning through this. So we look at this opportunity as just that. And when we come out of it, we've actually going to double what we can now present. We can go back to face, and now we have this new business model of virtual. So now we can reach all over the world without having people to come to California.
Hey,
I
David.
mean,
No,
that attitude is so good. Sorry, Randy. Go ahead, Randy.
Go ahead,
I'm just
Wessal.
I love everything he was talking about. I got really motivated. It reminded me of what John Boyero just said right prior, which was his parting note to us was to recall our attitude. And, just hearing you speak, it's evident that you have a positive, confident, forward-thinking attitude, despite all of the crisis, emergency, and other negative repercussions that have affected ELF, the Navy, and our own families, right? You're talking to me with a not ironed drop sheet behind you that I think is in the middle of your garage because you're trying to hide from the kids right now. And, we're all in this situation, right? But for some reason, your attitude is just chronically positive and moving forward. And it's very motivating to me. So can you comment on that really quick? To what do you believe you can attribute this incredible attitude that you have? How could we have the same attitude moving into the rest of our day today?
Personally and professionally, I've been through some emergencies as well as crisis. Just in 20 years, you consider we went through the Y2K crisis.
Yeah.
We went through the crisis of 9/11. We went through the housing crisis. We went through the stock market crisis, the bird flu crisis. And from an emergency perspective, my first deployment back in the 80s, I was married, and 2 months into deployment, my wife left. She cleaned out my bank account. She took every possession, what I did not have on my ship. That was hers. She took it. And I came through that.
Wow.
I've been married 27 years and deployed for months on end without seeing my family. I've had sailors die on my watch. I've seen sailors try to take their lives. We've had all kinds, been through, you name the equal opportunity stuff, from sexual harassment to workplace violence to low morale and no standards. And, there's all kinds of things. But I can always look back to those things. Hey, I made it through that. We're going to make it through this. And my faith in Christ, I'm a born again Christian. So that gives me some grounding, and not some, it gives me my grounding and my guidance and what I can hold on to. And at the end of the day, what I do and what the Enlisted Leadership Foundation does, what I do for my family, I want to leave that kind of legacy behind. I don't do this for me. What you probably, in one way or another, what do I want on that hyphen between the dates of born and death? So I want to define that hyphen, and people are going to define it differently based on their interaction with me and the way that I interact with them. It's not always the best of mistakes. I was reached out a couple weeks ago by somebody who I had not been in touch with, and it really hurt his feelings. You know what? And there was no reason for me not to do it other than I got too busy. It wasn't a priority, and that was wrong on my part. And so I made amends, and that person forgave me, and we're better now. But those type of things, and that's the other piece of it. Is in these difficult times, we look back on stuff. When somebody's thinking about something, when you think about somebody, pick up the phone and give them a call or shoot them a text. Leadership is always putting other people first. You think about what happened with the Theodore Roosevelt, and we won't get into the whys and the what ifs, but that captain wrote that letter to whoever and sent it over, whatever, I don't know, but he knew what the outcome potentially could have been. But it was important enough to put his sailors first. And not to say that nobody else was putting their sailors first, because I'm sure they are. But he had a duty and responsibility of being right there, boots on ground with 6,000 men and women. And in leadership, no matter the outcome, when you put the people first, it's the right decision.
Yeah. David, that's a really great point. And Wessal, you're a good co-host because you asked the question I was going to ask, so I thought of a new one.
Just love this perspective. This is talk about perspective.
It's great.
Wow.
It's great. David, one of the things that we talked about yesterday is this idea that you've given now some tips, right? If you're struggling right now, you can draw on past experience. Like, I made it through that. This is different, right? It's a different color, different flavor, but you can draw on that strength. But there was another angle to that, right? Which is that people who are good right now. They're in a good place. They're feeling empowered and they're making change and they are in a position of leadership that they in fact have an obligation, right, to help others. So Can you just double down on that point? You've touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure everybody understands the obligation that I think we feel that either leaders have or people who are exerting leadership tendencies during this crazy time.
Well, yeah, we're fortunate for those of us that we're all going through it, but some better than others. And as a leader, I believe that you have an obligation to be reaching out and helping those that are struggling. Go on social media, somebody in your profile, somebody in your friend group is going to be expressing that they need some assistance. So if you're looking for somebody, start there. You can start by donating. You're having the big donation, the fund drive on Wednesday. You can help out that way. And even if you're not in a leadership position, maybe you're just a worker bee. You're just a somebody. You don't have to be somebody to be able to reach out. Some of the, look at the most shared Facebook or social media posts. It's usually not about Mark Cuban doing something grandiose, right? It's about a little known somebody who does something just because it's out of the kindness of their heart.
Yes.
We all know the benefit of volunteerism and how reaching out and helping others just warms our heart. So do that. Don't wait to be asked. Don't think you can't because you're not in a position, because you can.
Yes.
If whatever you do touches one person, you are effective.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great way to think about it too. David, we're going to wrap up the show now. Are there any parting words for our audience that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, just go and try. Better to try and fail because there are no failures, right? What is it? It wasn't oh man, who created the light bulb? I drew a blank.
Oh, Thomas Edison?
Edison.
Yeah, Thomas Edison. 10,000 tries to create the light bulb, and somebody once said 10,000 times you failed. No, that's 10,000 small successes. And
Love
as
that motto.
as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you didn't get it right the first time. So don't be afraid. Look at what got you to where you're at and just try. And if you are afraid, if you're hesitant, talk to your sphere of influence, talk to your friends, talk to the ones that will not bring you down, not talk you down, but will encourage you and be truthful and honest, but encourage you to try.
That's beautiful. David, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time today. This is a great message for everyone out there listening.
Inspirational leadership. Thank you so much, David. We need this every day. I could use a dose of this every morning, actually. I love this. Thank you so much for sharing and for all of your tremendous service during your time in the military and for years thereafter. What you've done and what you continue to do for our enlisted leaders is a legacy that you've created. And I just thank you so much for the thousands of people that you've served and continue to serve. We are honored to be a part of that, and to give you a forum to speak about the Enlisted Leadership Foundation means a lot to us as well. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
All right, David. We'll talk to you
soon. Bye, David.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's great. So actually, for those of you listening who want to learn more about the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, I've got it up on screen right now. It's enlistedleadershipfoundation.org. We'll make sure to post it in the comments. It's a really fantastic program. And again, it was one, where David took extreme ownership in filling a vacuum that he thought existed, and he created a program that thousands of people have been able to benefit from. Wessal, just you're back on the screen now. Just as we kind of wrap this up and talk about tomorrow, for me, the thing that resonates the most, right, as a would-be leader, I guess, or I like to think of myself in some capacity as a leader, is this idea of selflessness, that leadership is selfless, right? And in making sure that you're doing the right things, that you're serving others wherever and whenever possible. So for me, that was the piece of this that really resonated. What about you, Wessal?
I mean, putting people first in his message about that being the most salient thing that he brought to us, I thought was really, really right on point. I think that's something you can do, whether it's just you alone in your living room right now, or you have a massive team of agents that you manage. Mm-hmm. Like just thinking about every decision that you make, not from a selfish perspective, accidentally, which I do think is what happens during crisis mode. We tend to make focused decisions based on the pressures around us. Like you saw that toilet paper hoarding that happened early on in the virus. Yes. These things happen at large when you're not controlling your mentality. And I think if you can't remember what to do in the situation, thinking about others first, whether it's putting your client first, putting your spouse first, putting your kids first in a situation where you're not exactly sure what to do, the people first motto definitely works as a default. And I think that, there's no surprise to me that military leadership have to think about that, because every decision they make, whether it's today or another day, literally has a lot. And back to our point of bringing this content to you this week that you can also repurpose and share with those that matter to you. We are honoring Memorial Day, which is fast approaching on Monday. And we are bringing people to you that can tie that message up for you to understand and just bring you back to your center. What really matters right now, right? The world is slowly reopening, right? As they say, things are slowly returning to some sense of normal. I believe there's a new norm coming. As we go through another set of unknowns as a result of the crisis that we've been in, putting people first, putting yourself first, and all of that is a great way to think about positioning your day for success. And I think we have a lot more days this week that are going to bring on some more successful people I think we're going to talk about.
I think that's great. We absolutely are. And so, tomorrow we've got Mary Maloney coming on board, and Wessal, I'm going to have you talk about her in just a second, but she is a top performing real estate agent in the San Diego area. And so she's going to be able to take a lot of these concepts that we're talking about this week and apply them directly to all of you out there, right, as you build your business. So Wessal, why don't you take just 30, 60 seconds and introduce Mary, because that's going to be a really great show.
This week is so amazing. So today we wanted to start you off with some real live action, right? We got John on the Air Force Base out in South Carolina with a flyover going with the Pledge of Allegiance to kick you off. We brought in one of the most tremendous enlisted leaders in the entire Navy, responsible for thousands of our active duty sailors during his 30 years on board. Tomorrow, we're bringing you a Navy veteran, spouse, mom, entrepreneur, and badass top producing listing agent, Mary Maloney from Hometown Realty in North County, San Diego. She is a firecracker, and she's going to come on and talk to you about her background, her experience that's prepared her from the military to react with her business in very actionable ways each of you as agentpreneurs can take back into your own business. She's also a massive advocate for appropriately educating real estate industry and civilians about military's benefits as it relates to home ownership and transfers across the country, which is now going to be a very large issue based on the headlines that we're seeing, Randy, in terms of home ownership and relocations. She's going to be talking to our agent database about that tomorrow. So please come listen to her. You're going to love the way that she presents. She's super smart. She's got a lot of actionable tactics that you guys can take back into your own business right away. And she's a fun time. So looking forward to having a strong, powerful lady leader on tomorrow as well.
Amen. Amen. All right. And as one little last reminder here, I've got our Facebook page up here. If you go to the Daily List Report on Facebook, you see it on the screen right now, and you click on the Enter to Win button on the left-hand side, you can fill out the form. You can visit our YouTube page through this once a day for multiple entries, and we are giving away 5 signed copies of Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership. And just so you don't forget, you can't buy now, but Jocko himself is actually going to be on the show on Friday with his colleague Andrew Paul, who's a top loan officer, and we're going to bring all of this home. So that's great. With that, I'm actually going to do the headlines. We decided to do the headlines at the end of the show instead of the beginning of the show. So Wessal, why don't you say goodbye to everyone for today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
I will. Real quick, don't forget, every agentpreneur out there, every day's content this week is repurposable, reshareable.
Yes.
Put it on your calendar. Leverage all of this to bring others to watch this with us and you to generate some amazing spread of this really wonderful content we're bringing for you. And of course, Jocko coming on live is an awesome draw for you to leverage against your audiences and your mailing list, your email campaign list. Please take advantage of this amazing content. All these tremendous leaders are bringing to you for free. Don't forget, set the reminders, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Wessal. We'll see you soon.